Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? Today we're going to talk about tuning. We'll first cover what is tuning and what does it mean to tune your vehicle. Then we'll cover what does it mean to have a stage 1, 2, 3 or having a custom tune. And then we'll talk about what are the different ways that you can tune a vehicle. And then I'll update you guys and tell you what direction I will be going with my 2000 Audi with the 2.7 liter bi-turbo engine. All right, so first up, what does it mean to tune a vehicle? Now, when someone says they've tuned their car, what they usually mean is that they've either tuned their ECU and they've made some modifications perhaps to the engine on their car in order to gain more horsepower and better performance. Because you can tune a car for better gas mileage, usually at the expense of performance, or you can tune it for more responsiveness. However, when these days people say they've tuned their car, they're talking about tuning their vehicle, their ECU and the engine in order to gain more horsepower and better performance. Because out of the factory, your car's engine and ECU is designed in a way to be able to deliver the maximum amount of performance and MPG as in efficiency, all the while being limited to whatever the standards of emissions are for whatever market that car is being sold into. And again, this is done by the way of your car's ECU. The ECU takes in different sensor inputs like the oxygen sensor, the mass airflow sensor, your manifold absolute pressure sensor, your crankshaft sensor, camshaft sensor. It takes all of that in and then it makes adjustment to the way of the engine runs by the way of the ignition timing, your fuel injectors, variable valve timing, and other things to get the maximum amount of performance and efficiency, all the while not going past the predetermined amount of emissions set depending on the market it's being sold to. Now when you tune your ECU, you're basically setting a goal to maximize performance and not be concerned so much about efficiency and emissions. Now I'm going to preempt some people that are going to leave comments saying they have this and this tune on their car yet they have passed emissions. Now that can happen if you have a light tune on your car. However, that's usually due to having a good catalytic converter. Now that catalytic converter may not remain good for long, so keep that in mind. With a light tune, you may be able to remain below that threshold. However, usually you're putting a bigger strain on your catalytic converter. All right, so that's usually what it means to tune a vehicle. Now let's talk about what does it mean to have a stage 1, 2, 3, or have a custom tune. All right, in so many words, the different stages you hear out there, like stage 1, 2, 3, is a loose set of standards set by the different companies that make software and hardware products for tuning and upgrading your car's engine and ECU. All right, so for example, a stage 1 tune for a lot of vehicles is usually just remapping the ECU or upgrading the software in the ECU. Now this is a loose standard, I say, because on my car, for example, not only you upgrade the software in the ECU with a stage 1 tune, some companies also recommend upgrading the diverter valves. And then a stage 2 tune for my vehicle would be not only a stage 2 ECU tune, but also the upgraded diverter valves plus upgraded downpipes and a catback exhaust. Now some companies would say for stage 2 you would also need to upgrade your intercoolers. Other companies say that's for stage 2 plus or stage 3, which also includes a stage 3 tune for the ECU, also upgrading the turbochargers, your fuel pump and other components. So it's a loose set of standards, but generally, of course, the more horsepower you produce out of your engine or you want to produce, you have to make a set of upgrades. And of course, a custom tune is when you have your car tuned by a professional using a dyno. Said professional would probably recommend you make certain upgrades depending on how much horsepower you want out of your car, and you listen to exactly what he recommends and you do that, and that becomes your custom tune. All right, next let's talk about how this software upgrade or tuning of the ECU that I keep talking about works. All right, so as you know, car manufacturers sell cars to many different markets, each market having their own set of standards when it comes to, or especially when it comes to emissions. So what the manufacturers came up with, they came up with a system concerning the ECU so that they could easily make modifications in order to be able to sell cars to every different market with each market standards, all the while not replacing the ECU entirely. So they're that way saving a lot of money when it came to cost. So in the 90s, what they did was that each ECU had an actual or physical chip on the ECU that had the mapping or the blueprint on how the car's engine should run in order to set stay below the threshold of the emissions. When this car was sold to so-and-so market, it had a certain chip, and a different market, it had a different chip. Now, upgrading or tuning the ECU on these cars, as you might guess, was pretty simple. You simply remove the chip on the ECU that came from the factory, you put a new chip in there with a new blueprint or mapping that improved performance. All right, so after that, as cars became more complicated, the engines began being controlled more electronically rather than mechanically. The ECU got more complicated as well. The chip on the ECU went away and gave way to more software-based controls. And in order to upgrade the ECU or tune the ECU on those cars, you had to use either a programmer or a programming device. Now, this programming device would connect to your car's ECU by the way of the OBD port on your car, and it would tune or remap the ECU on your car and would make permanent changes to the ECU. And if you wanted to restore the factory settings to your car's ECU, you would simply have to reuse the programming device and upload the factory settings to your car's ECU. All right, so another way that you can tune a vehicle is by the way of performance modules or performance chips. Now, I'm gonna just keep on saying performance modules because performance chips is gonna confuse some people with chip tuning that we talked about earlier. So performance chips, the way this works is that a programming device would be either continuously connected to the OBD port on your car, or it would be connected to a set of the connectors for a set of sensors under the hood usually. Basically, this module would come in between the sensor signals and the connector that would send that signal to the car's ECU. Basically, the performance module would make changes to the sensor signals that the ECU receives and manipulate that in order to gain more performance. However, the difference between this and the ECU remapping that we talked about is that this is not permanent. As soon as you remove the programming device from the computer, either from the OBD port or from the connectors under the hood, the factory settings is established or reestablished. All right, and last but not least, depending on your car's make and model, your car's ECU may not be reprogrammable, or maybe a performance module is not available to it and is also newer, so you can't really chip tune. So if that's the case, usually can simply replace the ECU, the factory ECU, with an aftermarket ECU, or what's commonly known as a standalone ECU. This ECU would be reprogrammable. You can make changes to the mapping on that ECU, either custom tune it or use a software from a company to have the different stages of tuning for that car. All right, so that should cover all the basics. Now, as far as what I'm going to be doing with my Audi, I'm going to be remapping the ECU on my car by the way of a programming device from Eurodyne. So yeah, basically I use this in conjunction with my laptop in order to upload, let's say, a stage 1 tune to the ECU and replace the factory tune from the ECU. And if I want to go back to the factory setting, I can again use this, what they claim, unlimited amount of times to reset the factory settings to the ECU. And that better be how it works, because I paid $800 for this, which is about $300 more than I paid for the entire car. All right, so subscribe and stay tuned for that video. But if you want to see more videos on tuning or modifying your car, make sure you check out this video in this corner, the one below it. Again, links in the description box down below as well. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.